Okay. Thank you all for your patience. We are all a bit of a victim, and we are all subject to technology in this day and age. And so I'm grateful that for those of you still with us, to stay with us. And I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused to those who expected us to begin promptly at 10:30. So get back to. So the first agenda item is the call to order. The time is currently, I'm reading Central Time, 10:56 a.m. on Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021. We have a quorum. Just wanted to read a kind of an opening comment. It's obviously been a very interesting time for everyone, especially those in our industry. The gavel fell recently on the regular session of the 87th legislature, and work to prepare members of the alcoholic beverage industry for a host of new laws was already underway at the TABC. Many of the new statutes that we saw, that we read about, generated a lot of headlines: expanded alcohol to go privileges, as well as the ability to carry a firearm without a permit. Others attracted relatively little notice, but are still important, such as the expansion of Sunday hours for off-sale premise sales. What's common across all these statutes is the need for TABC to provide clear, concise information on how each new law affects our industry. TABC's executive leadership, along with the subject matter experts on all public-facing agency divisions, are working to keep industry members informed. And I think that has been hopefully a hallmark of this agency over the last several years, in order to keep engaging in that public-private dialogue with business. As you might imagine, we've received a lot of questions from a number of parties, local governments, businesses, et cetera. And we begun sending weekly updates to tens of thousands of industry members across the state, trying to answer every one. The work will not be complete on September 1st. It is a perpetual job, and we plan to keep these lines of communications open. Today, we're going to discuss some very important topics that will affect our industry, and I look forward to our dialogue, and I look forward to hearing what staff has to say, and hopefully industry as well. So as we begin, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next agenda item is approval of the commission meeting minutes as of June 15th, 2021, and official record of the July 13th, 2021 public hearing. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Marino. We will now vote.
All voted.
Excellent. Minutes and official record approved as written. Our votes have been recorded. As you know, as most people know, a substantial part of our mission is public safety. And in that, we have peace officers who conduct business daily. And in that profession, those individuals, men and women, are exposed to dangers that many and most of us in the private sector and in the civilian populace, in some cases, cannot imagine and certainly don't deal with. And with that comes the unfortunate and tragic event involving loss of life of peace officers. So the first agenda item today is the Hall of Honor, the TABC induction ceremony. And therefore, I'd like to call on Director Fletcher, please.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Meredith Fletcher, the Director of Human Resources. Today, I'm pleased to present with you our next selections for the TABC's Hall of Honor. You may recall, back in May, we inducted the first two retired TABC Hall of Honor. TABC established the Hall of Honor in 2020 to recognize service, leadership, personal contributions made by employees, make the TABC a better place, setting the bar for those to follow them. Next slide, please. The eligibility criteria for induction into TABC's Hall of Honor targets employees who retired directly from TABC. They may be civilians or certified peace officers, living or deceased, and have distinguished themselves by one of three categories. First, they epitomize TABC's organizational values, such as modeling our cornerstones: service, courtesy, integrity, and accountability. Second, they are recognized as being trailblazers with an extraordinary positive impact to TABC. And finally, they serve as a critical change agent, changing the outlook and focus of the organization or shaping the organizational environment in a positive way. Although the two individuals we are recognizing today technically retire from TABC, they were nominated by a current employee. The nomination committee decided to make an exception to this eligibility criteria to pay tribute to their ultimate sacrifice by honoring them in this way. The nomination committee reviewed all nominations and made recommendations to the executive director who made final selections. We're privileged today to induct two certified peace officers into the TABC's Hall of Honor. Next slide, please. Before I introduce the honorees, I want to share information about the next round of selections. In July, our communications team announced the annual call for nominations. Information was sent out to TABC employees and industry members using industry and employee networks and social media platforms. The deadline for consideration is September 30th. Any individuals nominated but not selected last year will remain in the pool for consideration this year. Please contact Human Resources if you have any questions or to submit your nominations. Now I'll ask Jennifer Cruz to join the commissioners and the executive director in the presentation of awards on behalf of her father, Joseph J. Cruz. Attending for our inductee, Joseph J. Cruz, is his daughter, Ms. Jennifer Cruz. Other special guests in attendance today include Ms. Cruz's daughter, Ivy Townsend, and Uncle John Cruz. Joseph J. Cruz was a member of the TABC family from January 2nd, 1979 to September 21st, 1979. Inspector Joseph Thomas J. Cruz was the second commissioned officer of the TABC to die in the line of duty. Cruz was a dedicated law enforcement officer who had worked as a history teacher at Chester Independent School District in Tyler County before coming to TABC. He was stationed at the Baytown office in the Houston District. After departing an inspection at a licensed business on September 21st, 1979, an intoxicated driver came into Inspector Cruz's lane of traffic and hit his vehicle head-on. The badge of an inspector of the TABC is engraved in Inspector Cruz's tombstone above the words "to protect and to serve." Cruz, age 30, was survived by his wife and daughter, Jennifer Cruz. In his honor, TABC recognizes the new agent cadet with the highest grade point average in each agent academy as the Cruz Academic Award. So we've got our Hall of Honor certificate here. We also have our TABC 85th anniversary coin. And I'll call Lieutenant Roger Devine from the TABC Honor Guard. A presentation of flag.
Jennifer, please accept this flag on behalf of the Governor of the great state of Texas and the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. Our flag is recognized worldwide by its long white star on the distinctive blue field. Inspector Cruz and Inspector Pearson both made the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives to uphold and defeat the laws and values this flag represents. It's also a sign of honor and respect, and it's with honor and respect that I present it to you today. And on behalf of the Retired Officers Association, here is a original TABC inspector badge for you to put with Inspector Cruz's Woodville Police Department badge. So God bless you and God bless each of your families.
Thank you, sir. John. I'm honored.
Ms. Cruz, would you like to say anything, or commissioners?
It's an honor. I can't thank everyone enough. I am so proud of this agency and the work that everyone does. This job meant everything to my father. And I know he's so proud of all of you. Just keep up the good work. I'm not gonna blubber all over everybody today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lieutenant Devine for his efforts in getting this done for both Jay and for Agent Pearson. We appreciate it so much. And also a shout out to a new friend that Jennifer and I have had, Javier Casares, who is the education and training officer that we have been talking to for the last year and a half. And to all of you, for all of your service to Texas, I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Next, I'll ask Lieutenant Roger Devine to join the commissioners and the executive director in the presentation of awards for Delbert Pearson. Mr. Pearson's daughter, Peggy Curley, was unable to travel today for the ceremony, but I understand she may be attending virtually. Ms. Curley has asked the Lieutenant Roger Devine stand in on her behalf to accept the awards for Delbert Pearson. Lieutenant Devine is a current employee, and he submitted the nomination for both of these individuals. And will personally deliver her awards at a later date. So again, we have the Hall of Honor certificate and flag. Delbert H. Pearson was a member of the TABC family from February 4th, 1952 to January 18th, 1973. Inspector Delbert H. Pearson was the first commissioned officer of the TABC to die in the line of duty. Originally from Paris, Texas, Inspector Pearson had worked with the TABC for nearly 21 years. He was committed to protecting Texans in his community and across the state. On January 18, 1973, Inspector Pearson responded to a radio call from the Clarksville Police Department requesting his assistance. He was killed after identifying himself while confronting a suspect in a legal whiskey stash investigation. Inspector Pearson, 55, was survived by his wife and 2 daughters. In his honor, TABC gives the Pearson Award to the graduate of each academy who demonstrates the top physical skills performance in the class. Commissioner, this concludes my presentation. Would you like to, do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As grief is not always just assuaged by time, and we can never forget those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect our great state. But we also at this time celebrate those that have dedicated their lives to serving. And I think it is absolutely appropriate at this time that we take these moments to encourage young men and women in our state to follow this tremendous and extraordinary profession, because it is truly one that is not only honorable but needed. And so with that, I am just grateful for all the work that everyone in the agency has done, both on the law enforcement side and the administrative side, to protect our citizens. And so with that, I'd like to move to a celebration of an extraordinary man who has dedicated literally his entire adult life to public service and to public safety. And so the next agenda item is the retirement of my good friend, Robert Sines, Deputy Executive Director of Enforcement. Chief Kirkendall, if you would please, sir.
Yes, sir. Good morning, commissioners. My name is, for the record, is Victor Kirkendall. I serve as your chief of law enforcement here at TABC. It is my privilege to announce the official retirement of Robert Sines, Deputy Executive Director for Enforcement. I'm going to ask Chief Sines to go ahead and join us up front at this time. So Robert Sines has been for the TABC team since 1993. He has worked his way through the ranks from agent training to his current role as Deputy Executive Director of the Enforcement Division. He has worked in many different areas of the state, including Galveston, Del Rio, Odessa, Houston, and Austin, and has gained valuable experience in how to work with and serve the diverse people of Texas. He has over 16 years of supervisory experience with the commission. Sines graduated from the Texas State University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Immediately after graduating from college, he served as a patrolman with the Del Rio Police Department and left the department as a detective to come to work for TABC. Sines holds a master officer certificate and has been a licensed peephole instructor since 1997. He is a graduate of the University of Texas Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs, the Governor's Executive Development Program, as well as the Texas Department of Public Safety's Command College. He has also received the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Association's Leadership Trilogy for graduating from the 27th Executive Leadership Institute. On a personal note, I'd like to, on behalf of the Enforcement Division and all the men and women here at TABC, to personally thank Chief Sines for his many years of dedicated service, mentorship, and guidance. Thank you very much.
For the military, we have a tradition which carried on when I came over here of handing out points for excellence. Now this coin, I've never seen a bigger coin in my life. This is also one of the heaviest coins I've ever seen. So you can use it as a personal weapon. But this is a retirement coin from the agency. Congratulations.
Thank you all very much. It has been an outstanding ride. I have so many people to thank that we don't have the time to do that here today. Again, I just want to thank everybody. Everybody, wishes to reach this point in their careers, and I was able to do it, and certainly with help from many in this room. And I'm going to miss y'all, but it's time for me to ride off into the sunset. Thank you.
Robert, I'm sorry that I could not be there for this very important moment, but I know that I'll have an opportunity to see you shortly and express my great thanks for your career. And as a former regent of the Texas State University system, I know you're a proud Bobcat, and all of Bobcat Nation salutes you for this great career, and we just all wish you the best. So, sir, and God bless, Godspeed. The next agenda item is the announcement of changes in TABC's enforcement leadership and administrating of oath. Executive Director Kirkendall and Director Fletcher, if you please.
Again, for the record, I'm Amanda Fletcher, Director of Human Resources. With the retirement of Chief Sines, today we're announcing changes to enforcement leadership. Executive leadership has issued a management-directed transfer of Victor Kirkendall to the position of Deputy Executive Director for the Enforcement Division. Victor Kirkendall currently serves as the Chief of Law Enforcement for the Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission. Kirkendall began his law enforcement career upon graduating from the East Texas Police Academy in 1992. Kirkendall joined TABC in 2001 as an enforcement agent. Before that, he was a criminal investigator with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. Kirkendall rose through the agency's ranks, starting as to the Chief of Law Enforcement. He was stationed at several TABC offices throughout the state during his career, to include El Paso, Belton, Bryan College Station, Waco, Arlington, Austin, and eventually headquarters. Kirkendall has specialized training in the area of alcohol-related enforcement. He is an instructor in the DWI detection and standardization and field sobriety training and has extensive training in the TABC, Texas Alcoholic Beverage Code and rules. Kirkendall majored in criminal justice at both Sam Houston State University in Huntsville and the University of Texas at El Paso, and is a graduate of the Institute of Law Enforcement Administrative School of Executive Leadership. Kirkendall holds a Master Peace Officer license through the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement and has received several awards throughout his law enforcement career, including the State of Texas Valor Award and the Jaime Padron Memorial Award. Kirkendall served in the U.S. Coast Guard in the Galveston Coast Guard Reserves in Galveston, Texas. He currently resides in the Waco area with his wife, Jamie, and they have 2 adult daughters enjoying traveling and fishing. Would you like to come up? Congratulations, Deputy Executive Director.
Thank you very much.
So executive leadership has also issued a management directive transfer of Brandy Norris to the position of Chief of Law Enforcement. Her daughter Haley is here to read her bio. Brandy Norris currently serves as the Director of Criminal Intelligence Unit for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. She began her law enforcement career in June of 1997 with the College Station Police Department. After earning a Bachelor of Science degree in sociology from Texas A&M, during her first 8 years with CSPD, she served as a patrol officer, a field training officer, a hostage negotiation team member, and a detective. During this time, she earned her intermediate peace officer license with the Texas Commission of Law Enforcement. Norris promoted to sergeant in 2005. She served as a patrol sergeant, a detective sergeant, an HMT leader, and she earned her advanced and master's peace officer license. Was named CSPD's 2007 Supervisor of the Year and was a supervisory member of the CSPD's 2008 Outstanding Unit Award. In 2009, she promoted to lieutenant, in which capacity she oversaw CSPD's Internal Affairs Division, grants, budget, and revamped CSPD's employee evaluation system. She promoted to assistant chief in 2010, where she served in all departmental bureaus, including patrol, operations support, and information services, until her retirement in October of 2020. While assistant chief, she earned a Master's of Science degree from Sam Houston State University in Criminal Justice, Leadership, and Management. Doris has one grown daughter. Who is a junior at Texas A&M. Now I got permission to say a little something about my mom. While I can read off everything that she's done, there's nothing that will quite show how amazing she is as a leader. With an industry filled with strife and chaos, and a time where social support is not there at all times, my mom is somebody who brings logic, empathy, and control to an industry. I love you. Congratulations.
First, we gotta get the formalities out of the way. It's my pleasure to swear you in, Chief Norris. If you will raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Brandy Norris,
I, Brandy Norris,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties of Chief of Law Enforcement
that I will faithfully execute the duties of Chief of Law Enforcement
for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission of the State of Texas,
for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission of the State of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States and of this state.
and laws of the United States and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
With me today is Haley, but also with me is her friend Foster and a friend of mine, Patricia. So do a picture and then all of us. Let's do that. So I got told I have to say a few words, and a few is the important word there. I'm looking forward to what the agency, Deputy Director Kirkendall, General Nettles, and Assistant Chief of Staff, Chaplain and I can accomplish over the next few months. This opportunity came to me, and when it came to me, I realized that God has a plan, and this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I look forward to meeting everyone who I haven't met. I'm finally getting to the point that I can start meeting people in person, which is really exciting for me. And so putting names with faces and getting to know everyone and to grow. And so I look forward to what we can accomplish. And thank you for the opportunity.
What an outstanding and exciting day. Congratulations, Deputy Executive Director Kirkendall and Chief Norris. The future of the agency is indeed bright, and we're very excited about new leadership. And so we all, on behalf of the commission, wish you all very well and much success, and looking forward to this new chapter in the future of this great agency and our great state. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments?
I'd just like to say for Brandy, obviously being a fellow Aggie myself, congratulations. You're making the Aggie Nation very proud today. And great job, Mom. Beautiful young woman, also going to A&M. So our future is very bright, but very excited for everything that's happening in our agency. And we've just, like, I agree with the chairman, our future is very bright with the leadership that we have in place.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. And yes, as a Longhorn, I am absolutely going to give a shout out. Whoop, or is that, I don't know if I did that right, but hopefully I didn't mess that up too badly. But yeah, indeed, Aggie Nation is certainly proud today. So we're very excited. Thank you all. All right, so next we're going to move to public comment. General Counsel Smith, has anyone signed up for public comment, sir?
As you might expect, Chairman, we have had some folks sign up for public comments. We have 6 members of the public that have signed up for public comments. What I'd like to do is I'll call each of y'all just in the order in which I received y'all's blue cards. you're all able to come up, introduce yourselves and who you're speaking on behalf of, if it's yourself or a business or trade association. I'd also ask that we limit public comments to 2 minutes each. We obviously have a big meeting, still a lot to carry out, and we had a little bit of a late start. So with that, is Kelsey Striper available?
Good morning, Commission. My name is Kelsey Erickson Streifert. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations and Advocacy for the Texas Restaurant Association. Thank you for hearing from us today. I'll keep it brief. I'll just say that, you know, the restaurant industry is critical to the alcohol industry in Texas and, of course, to our economy here in Texas. We've obviously taken a beating in the last year and a half, just as many industries have across our state. The good news is consumer demand is strong and is really rearing back to levels we saw before the pandemic. But that does, of course, bring its own challenges. We're seeing inflation really increase the pricing of a lot of our products at the same time that we're experiencing a pretty critical labor shortage. We lost about 60% of our workforce at the peak of the pandemic. So that's, of course, going to take some time to really ramp up and scale back up. At the same time, we're obviously seeing the Delta variant cases increase. There's a lot of anxiety in the industry around that. So I think our ask would really be to keep doing what you're doing. You've been so proactive throughout this pandemic, very communicative. Let's keep that up because it's working really well and our members really appreciate it. Special shout out to Jared, who always keeps us very informed. We're very grateful for him. And we just appreciate the partnership very much. And we're here to help in any way we can. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sherry Helston, you can come up.
Hello, my name is Sherry Huddleston, and I'm here on behalf of Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. I too will keep this brief. I just wanted to state that during this process of having to review the licensing fees, we truly believe that the agency and the staff has been very consistent throughout the entire process. They've been very transparent and they've been very fair. So I just wanted to put that on record and thank y'all very much for your work.
Thank you.
Is there a Lance Lively?
Yes, Clark, there is. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Lance Lively. I'm the executive director of the Texas Package Stores Association, representing the hard men and women who work and sell alcohol in the 2,800 package stores approximately across the state of Texas. In terms of the permit fees and that process, I would put to you that if we surveyed 1,000 permittees across the state, said, would you like us to increase your fees? 1,000 of them are going to say no. Throughout this process, I heard from very few of our members. A number of them did call, but I did explain to them that through the process, which I applaud the agency on this piece particularly, is looking at those, there's a cost incurred with each permit, and people don't realize that sometimes. And over the last 10, 15 years, those costs have increased. Everything's going up. So naturally, it would stand to reason that permit fees are going to go up. So we can't ignore that. But I do commend the agency for the openness, the transparency throughout the process. Obviously, fees will go up, and we know that. But I do like the fact that you plugged into why they were going up. We were explained to in a very thorough manner about the increases, slight as though they may be, and then certainly the consolidation of our permits, because we do carry a lot of those into one permit from an efficiency standpoint is very helpful. So thank you to the agency for the work you've done and for working with our industry to make this happen. Thank you.
Rick Donnelly?
Good morning, Commissioner, members of the commission. I am Rick Donnelly, President of the Beer Alliance of Texas, beer distributors throughout the state. I just wanted to come and also echo what a great job your staff has done on the whole question of increasing license and permit fees. Obviously, the legislature in its infinite wisdom decided that they had all they wanted of that subject and gave you the awesome responsibility to address this. But needless to say, this agency needs the necessary funding to be able to provide service that you do for the state of Texas. The process of which the staff entered into this was completely open and transparent. They reached out to us on a number of occasions for our input. I presented it to all of my members, and I have not had one single member that had any concerns about staff recommendations whatsoever. So I don't want to get into the numbers, that's your job, and but we will support whatever you decide. Thank you very much, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler Rudd?
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Tyler Rudd. I'm the Central States Counsel for the Wine Institute, and I'm not as good as the ones before me. I actually have to read what I wrote. But Wine Institute is a trade association comprised of about 1,000 California wineries and associated businesses. We work on the state, federal, and international levels to advocate public policy that enhances the ability to responsibly produce, promote, and enjoy wine. I want to testify on behalf of Wine Institute to show our support for TABC staff in creating the new licenses and permit fees. What the staff had to do was somewhat Herculean, I would say. Not only did they need to consolidate licenses and fees and create a single fee for each of these, while taking into account public safety, equity, resources, and revenue, they also likely heard from every single stakeholder or organization and then some. Having talked to both staff and several stakeholders, I know how challenging it was for the staff to come up with these while taking into account every person's opinion. Mine was one of those opinions, as I advocated for a lower direct shippers permit fee. The staff listened to my concerns on the overall effect of the initial proposed fee as well as other stakeholders. And they lowered the fee to make a much more manageable one that will not create bigger problems in the state of Texas. So thank you, commissioners, for your time and consideration of the new proposed fees, a task I do not envy. And I'd like to give a shout out to some of the specific members that were very helpful along the way, being Shanna, Marianne, Thomas, Jared, Nick, Deputy Executive Chaplain, and of course, General Metals. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Justin Engel.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Justin Engel. I'm the managing member of Houston Cider Company. You have a written testimony, but I would like to state that I did submit a data report to the rules yesterday. Hopefully you already have that in your hands. I'm actually kind of struck by this. So thank you for allowing me to speak. This line of work in the fee and permit consolidation seemed to be unnecessarily rushed and lack the transparency needed within this agency as stipulated by the Sunset Advisory Commission back in 2019. For one, an agency should never compare itself to brisket. As home chefs, as in personal chefs, we always know that brisket needs to come with fat. And although we understand that the agency needs to be cognizant of the revenue that's raised, the agency also needs to be cognizant of its expenditures. Through this process, the Sunset Advisory Commission back in 2019 noted that the permit consolidation would create losses in revenue. But with the increase in information technology, there would probably also be a loss of labor hours within the agency because of transitioning to the AIM system, for instance. With the consolidation of the winery permit fees, the winery industry is probably hit the hardest. Right now, the proposed fee is about a 400% increase over the weighted average permit fee paid to the state. Without any data, either from Ms. Horton through emails or through open records requests that have been closed, one cannot speculate where this 400% increase is going to in the TABC coffer. The proposed, my opinion on the fee that should be proposed for wineries is that of $1,370 for a 2-year fee. This is, it is a weighted average for all of the consolidated winery permit fees for all of the industry members, keeping in mind that wineries must usually carry 2 or multiple permits because of having their vineyards, production area, and tasting rooms, which can also be 100 miles away from the state or from the production area. With having the fee set to $1,307, this would provide the most revenue neutral fee structure without taking into consideration the elimination of cost burden by TABC to enforce and regulate the limited subordinate permits. I asked the commission to really think about the increase in winery permit fee. I know this is a very difficult time for many members in the industry. On a personal side, I think their commission also needs to look into the auditing and investigations unit of this commission. My company is undergoing the 362nd day of a routine audit. That's where the fat needs to be trimmed. With that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. So Mr. Engel was the last of the registration cards we have, but Matt Martin, did you want to make a comment? I know you had signed up online yesterday. You care to say anything?
I didn't expect to. I'm happy to though. If you all.
No worries.
That's my love it. Keep it rolling. Thank you for asking that.
Chairman, that's the final public comment.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. All right, we are now going to move to the next item. Consideration of potential action on order and proposal for decision regarding Dalton's Corner Bar and Grill LLC. General Counsel Smith, if you please, sir.
I promise you I'll be done with me in just a second. Commissioners, y'all have in front of you the administrative law judge's proposal for decision regarding Dalton's Corner Bar and Grill. So I offered up to you for final decision making on the administrative law judge's findings of fact and conclusions of law. Chairman Lilly.
All right. Are there any questions? So no questions or comments from the commissioners I hear. All right. I move that we adopt the findings of fact and conclusion of law contained in the proposal for decision, that we authorize me on behalf of the agency to sign the order on behalf of the commission, rather. And is there a second to the motion? Second. Thank you, sir. We'll now vote.
All voted.
Excellent. Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, we are now in the rule and adoption and repeal of rules section. The next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of repeal of rules 33.9, 0.11, 0.12, 0.15, 0.25, 0.26, 0.27, 0.28, 0.30, 0.31, 0.32, 0.37, 0.38, and 0.39. Ms. Horton?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Shana Horton, and I serve as the agency's rules attorney. With me today are Mary Ann Warlock, Director of SIPI, and Vanessa Mayo, the agency's Chief Officer. They're here in case you have questions about item 5.5P rulemaking. But before we begin that discussion, let's address the other rule packages on your agenda today for adoption. There are no new proposed rules to vote on today. As you know, the Chapter 33 rulemaking included rearrangement of rules and consolidation of fees previously in separate rules into the fee chart. As a result, the rules in item 5.1 need to be repealed before we can adopt the new proposed rules. Subject to any questions, this item is now before you for your deliberation and decision.
All right. Having no questions or comments, I move to approve adoption of the repeal of rules in agenda item 5.1 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. We will now vote.
All voted.
Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. The next agenda item is consideration potential action on adoption of repeal of rules 4.5.22 and 4.5.121. Ms. Horton.
These rules are being moved to different rule numbers, which requires them to first be repealed from their current location. If there are no questions, this item is now before you for deliberation decision.
Thank you, ma'am. I move to approve adoption and repeal of rules 4.5.22 and 4.5.121 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Okay, I think I heard Commissioner Boatright. Thank you, sir. We will now vote.
Let's do it.
All voted.
Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. Next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of amended rules 33.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.10, 0.16, 0.29, 0.43, 0.44, 0.45, and 0.90, and new rules 33.24, 0.25, and 0.26. Ms. Horton, please.
This item, you're voting on adoption of all proposed changes to Chapter 33, other than the new fee schedule, which is in 33.23. And we will consider that separately in a later item. The agency received no comments on these new and amended rules. Subject to your questions, this item is now before you for your deliberation and decision.
I have no comments. Commissioners, we now vote to approve adoption of the amended rules and new rules in agenda item 5.3 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
I believe that was Commissioner, I did not recognize either Commissioner Mack or Atkins. We do have a second. We will now vote.
All have voted.
Votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. The next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of amended rules 45.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.25 through 0.27, 0.30, 45.40 through 45, 0.43, 45.50, 0.106, 0.113, 117, 0.131, and new rules 45.51, 0.121, 0.123 through 45.127, and 45.130. The lack of oxygen at this altitude, and I think I'm going to need to grab some here, and the new rule 45.122 with amendments from the proposed version. Ms. Horton, if you please, ma'am.
Commissioners, during the public comment period on this rule package, we received some feedback on proposed rule 45.122F. The proposed rule language is almost verbatim from the federal regulations. However, it is subject to an interpretation that any use of the Texas state flag on a label or in an advertisement is categorically prohibited. This was pointed out to staff by an attorney whose clients include some large manufacturers with high volume label prints and multi-million-dollar ad campaigns. And before his clients embark on such investments, they would prefer a rule that provides more regulatory certainty that their use of the Texas flag is not prohibited under this rule. I revised the rule slightly to provide a way for those who are planning to use flags and other symbols to be given an exception to the general prohibition by the executive director, which he must give if the use of the flag or other symbol is not capable of misleading the public into thinking the state of Texas manufactures or endorses the product in any way. As much as the Texas flag is incorporated into advertising and labels already, that risk is certainly low. However, this revision provides that level of comfort for manufacturers. Subject to your questions, there are changes to chapter 45. There were no comments, and this item is now before you for your deliberation and decision.
Creating that exception makes a lot of sense. I'm glad we could be responsive to the request on behalf of our manufacturers. Do any of the other commissioners have questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chairman. This is Boatright. I'm glad there's an exception. That seems like a good idea. Not sure about putting it solely in the hands of one person. Seems like something that we should probably have a little oversight over, just in case there's a difference of opinion on that. Just don't think that one person should be able to make a final decision regarding whether somebody's allowed to put the Texas flag on their beer can. I mean, I have a strict policy of not drinking beer that doesn't have a Texas flag on it. Something that I violate regularly when I drink several dozen other kinds of beer. But anyway, still strict policy of only drinking beer with Texas flag on it. I think that that's something that we all see is not a big deal, as something that can and in a lot of cases should be done. And I don't like a default rule that people aren't allowed to put our state on their stuff, but that there's an exception that's solely in the hands of one person. That doesn't strike me as a good idea. Anyway, thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Boatright, I appreciate your input. We will move, however, to approve pending vote of the commission to adopt the amended rules and new rules of agenda item 5.4 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. We have a second. We'll now vote.
Voted.
All right. Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. The next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of amendments to Rule 33.23. Ms. Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start with a brief presentation, just 3 slides, to help inform your discussion today. TABC needs to collect about the same amount of revenue as in recent years per legislative direction. The Sunset Staff Report states that the recommendation to remove fees from statute and require TABC settlement rule is intended to have no negative impact to the general revenue fund. Moreover, the fiscal for the Sunset Bill did not attribute any cost to general revenue from the requirement. The analysis assumed that TABC would set fees at a rate that would cover revenue loss and regulatory costs. The agency used total revenue collections in fiscal years in 2019 for fees and surcharges for licenses and permits and licensing admin fees. The amount, as you'll see here, is $152,539,681, but I'll refer to it generally as $153 million. This is the minimum revenue to be generated from licensing fees in order to have no negative impact to general revenue for licensing fees. In other words, $153 million is the revenue neutral target. Any changes to the fees as published, which is discussed on the next slide, uses this number as a common denominator by which all reductions are based. Staff has estimated licensing fee revenues over the next 2 years could total anywhere between $153 million and $182 million based on the proposed fees as published. $182 million is the best case scenario in terms of revenue generation. Revenues depend on the fees, but are also affected by several hard to predict variables. 2 of those variables are the wholesale restructuring of alcohol permits and the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on industry. These require staff to account for unexpected revenue shortfalls, which is why there is a 19% potential increase in GR. I want to note that the $183 million in revenue from the fees, 182 in revenue from the fees published by the Commission for 2022 to 2023 for permits is an estimate. The agency was directed to set fees based on a logical formula that considered certain factors. The agency used a formula that relied on available data to estimate agency resources used. Instead of using the existing permit structure, the formula had to be applied to half of the permit types that currently exist for the 86th legislature, which created a new permit type and eliminated 14 permit types on September 1st, 2019, and another 25 permit types that will be eliminated on September 1st. The permit types that gain the authority of the repeal permit types have to be considered as well, and permit types that gain lost authorities due to consolidation of beer and ale into a single malt beverage category. There were a lot of moving parts that are still in motion. One way to think of it is that the agency used the data for 75 permit types and then had to apply that to its 37 new permit types. This is only one of the multitudes of complicating factors that the agency is faced with, many of which are beyond the TABC's control, including the pandemic's impact on licenses. With few exceptions, statutory fees have not changed since 1983. Many of the fees do not make sense when compared with fees charged for similar types of permits. TABC aims to rectify these discrepancies and more fairly allocate license and permit fees across the industry. While some fee adjustments may seem dramatic to a few permit holders, other segments of the industry have shouldered a disproportionate amount of the burden to fund regulatory costs in past years. Next slide, please. Based on the fees as published, staff anticipates a maximum of $183 million in licensing fee revenue could be generated. This is $29 million or 19% more than the revenue neutral target of $153 million necessary to maintain the agency's current licensing fee contribution to general revenue. If the Commission wants to reduce fees as published across the board, there are multiple options as outlined in this table and in the graph on the next slide. For example, if the Commission reduced the fees as published by 10%, which would be staff recommendation, the expected revenue would be $165 million, which is more than the revenue neutral target. If the Commission reduced the fees by 15%, The agency would, based on multiple assumptions, break even in terms of the contribution to GR. Because of the unknown variables, a 15% reduction is obviously riskier because of the increasing probability of undercollecting. It's up to the commission to consider the unknown variables affecting potential revenues and evaluate risks to figure out what fee levels will produce an acceptable revenue amount that may result in an increase or decrease to GR. Such unknown variables include the reconfigured license and permit structure to be implemented on September 1st and its impact to the number and mix of permits and licenses held by industry members, and how the pandemic will impact the number of permits going forward. For example, if the state experiences a decrease in the number of mixed beverage permits, so those are for your bars, this could have a significant impact on revenue overall, since those mixed beverage permit holders make up a large percentage of our overall alcohol permits. Next slide, please. This represents the same data on the previous slide, but in the form of a graph. The tall columns represent potential revenues, and the green columns the increased contribution to GR based on published fees or reduction. The first set of columns represents the 183 million generated by fees as published, 29 million in dark green, or 19% the line, more than the revenue neutral target. From left to right, as the fees are reduced from published amounts, the contribution to GR is reduced, as shown by the increasingly smaller green columns and line, until the contribution to GR drops below the revenue neutral target, indicating a reduction in the agency's contribution to GR. Regardless of how the data is presented, it is the commission's decision to weigh the variables and determine if a reduction is necessary, and if so, how much. To sum up, staff has proposed fees that, depending on the circumstances, could result in collection of up to about 29 million of our revenue target, but only if everything in the next 2 years is ideal in terms of the economy and if all of our many assumptions pan out. The proposed fees are conservative enough that even if things go badly over the next 2 years, we would still hit our revenue target. And the range is broad between those two numbers due to the many, many unknown factors. As we discussed at our last meeting, it is your option to decrease these fees today, depending on the level of risk that you're comfortable with. Also, if you make a reduction, please keep in mind that we just went through rulemaking and adopted the fee for the consumer delivery permit in 2019. And because of that, we left it alone in this process. It would be appropriate to exclude that fee from any changes the commission wishes to make today. An additional consideration, if you choose to decrease the fees by a percentage, is that the mixed beverage permit original application is 1 fee and the renewals are half of that. So a percentage cut wouldn't maintain that relationship, and I would recommend that whatever percentage you cut should be applied to the mixed beverage original fee, and that the mixed beverage renewal fee should be half of that. The last thing is that for ease of administration, staff would ask that for any decrease, the dollar amount be rounded to the nearest 100. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, for the time and attention you have already put into this rulemaking and for the opportunity to make this presentation today. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And as I mentioned earlier, Marianne Warlock, Director of CIPI, and Ms. Mayo, agency's CFO, are also here to answer your questions. The item is now before you for your deliberation and decision.
Thank you very much, everyone. First of all, for all the enormous amount of work that has gone into this. This has certainly been a topic that has garnered a lot of attention, justifiably so, both within the agency as well as within industry. And I understand that we have legislative standards, but we also have revenue requirements to meet. The process our staff used ensured we used the legislature's required considerations, also that we meet the revenue requirements as expected. As was just said, there are so many different moving parts, relative expenditures, agency resources per permit, as we also mentioned, half of which are dedicated to public safety. And so there is a great deal of effort and thought, not only with this, as well as the volume of applications that may be received on these new permits. And then, of course, we have to consider the economic considerations, which in any projection, there's tremendous amount of variability. So it is an imperfect science, and yet we have to go through a process which we have done both internally and externally to try to create something that is fair. You know, and I certainly am comfortable with 10% a reduction, resulting in an estimated, I guess, 11 million risk cushion, but not with 15%, because I think that brings us perilously close to a negative outcome if the variables that were discussed on a worst case scenario come to bear. With that said, I think we can do better than 10%, and I'd like to recommend a 12% cut across the board. But yet there's still one other thing that I think needs to be mentioned, and I think it was brought up by one of the public comments. And that is the concern that we have on that there's no real delineation in size, and the small producers and the impact upon small producers. You know, what we don't want to make create or price anyone out of business or out of the market. And so I feel like while it can't be done today, we have to adopt fees today for September 1st implementation. That does not mean it cannot be done at all. And I think in addition to making across the board cut, I'd like to direct TABC staff to study the issue and bring up some options for how we might adjust fees based upon size of the businesses and based upon their production tier. And so, you know, I would like to ask the commissioners for their thoughts on this item at this time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Mack. I think that's a great idea. I know that's something that was brought up in the public hearing that we had recently as it relates to taking our forms and figuring out tiers of businesses and how we would aggregate that data. I do think that that is a great idea. In addition to what you've proposed, I'd like to also just kind of throw out there, you know, if this task force, since they're already aggregating data, is it also a possibility that we could, you know, in the event that our assumptions are wrong and these assumptions come in favor of the commission, can we also look at aggregating that data on an ongoing basis in relationship to whatever cut that the commission comes up with? If we could have gone lower, is that something that we can look at on an ongoing basis so that we, if we do, what's the word, trim the fat, give this task force the ability to do that in conjunction with this tiered approach? It's just something that I thought would, since we're doing data aggregation, that would be something that we could look at as well.
Excellent point. Thank you.
A question to Commissioner Mack's point. At any time, we could reconvene and further reduce the fees if we needed to. Is that correct?
That's right.
So, my concern is, I love the fact that at the last commission meeting, we challenged this and said, we need to do better. And let's look at what our true revenue targets are and where we need to come back with. And I like the staff's recommendation of 10%. Aside from Mr. Engel and the winery permit fee, what we heard from industry was they were accepting of the permits as originally presented, the fees as originally presented. So my concern is that if we move to 12% and our estimates are off and we need to collect more revenue, we're going to be back here with a big fight trying to increase fees versus as a business owner, me looking at it and saying, okay, great. I understand what the fee is. I accept the fee. I incorporate it into my business model. If later on the commission adjusts it down, that's a bonus, right? I think coming back and having to increase is going to be a very, very difficult fight and unfair to the industry. So I'm more comfortable with the 10% reduction. I applaud staff for coming back with that recommendation, and I would lean more towards the 10%. Tell me what would happen if we move to a 12 or 15% reduction and we're short on revenue. What would that?
For the record, Vanessa Mayo, Chief Financial Officer. I would say there were two options that could be brought forth to the commission. We could choose to keep the fees as is and continue to have a shortfall at the end of the biennium. However, we would have to report that shortfall in our legislative appropriation request with an explanation as to what happened. The second option would be to raise the fees mid-biennium. And as you mentioned, raising a fee mid-biennium for permits would be one difficult to report. It would kind of skew our revenue. We currently have a 2-year permit, so we compare biennium to biennium. If we were to change it midstream, there would be a bulk of permits that would perhaps now carry a disproportionate amount of that burden. For example, the mixed beverages in the first year got this current 12% reduced fee or 10% reduced fee. And then the subsequent mixed beverages, after we have to raise the fees, will now pay more, which is almost unfair compared to the mixed beverages who were early on. And this is solely will be based on their renewal period. And then the same would go for folks that are trying to come into business new next year versus this year. They would be disproportionately affected and they would carry the bulk of the burden because once we identify that shortfall, we have to make up for it in that shortened time period. So again, we would have to raise the fees and make it clear and reevaluate everything midstream for folks with a 2-year permit, or we could report that we are just not making the target. So that would be the commission's policy.
So in looking at that, and I absolutely agree with the chairman's recommendation of our small producers and the winery permit fee, and I think we need to evaluate those more. What that leads me to, though, is that that's a potential revenue reduction that we're looking at there. So I come back to jumping to a 12% when we're saying we also want to evaluate some of these others and have a fee reduction out of some of these others. That could be an even further reduction, getting closer to that 15%, which I think is going to lead us into a troublesome scenario. So I'm leaning to the 10% reduction as proposed by staff, but I would like to, be kept aware of where we stand. And if in 6 months we can jump to 12%, we jump to 12%. If a year we can jump to 12% or 15%, we can make those reductions further down the line. But also an evaluation of the small producers and the winery permit to see what we may be able to do to address those concerns.
So data aggregation is you support that
absolutely
moving forward for.
Yes.
I agree as well. Can you tell us the difference in dollar amount from 10 to 12? What that amount is?
Yes. Hold on just 1 second.
Looks like it's going to be about 4 or 5 million. It's a
$4 million.
substantial amount.
So this is Miriam Warlock, Strategic Initiatives and Performance Improvement. So if there was a 12% reduction, it would generate 159 million. So, which would give back to GR 6 million more than we do now.
It's six million deduction, almost a $6 million reduction versus the 10%, 5 to 6 million.
$6 million buffer essentially, not with.
Can you go back to the slide number 2? Yeah, that way you can sort of see the in between.
So I have a question here. Obviously we need to have revenue neutrality here. We're not trying to make money on this situation, which is why I came up I did not come up, which is why I thought the 12% was a reasonable middle ground. Can we look at that chart again? So if we go to 12%, say again, because unfortunately I'm not seeing the chart. I have a hard copy, but so if we go to 12%, what is the cushion that we would have?
Sounds like a $6 million cushion.
4%.
Again, in my opinion, as a percentage, that's getting tight because we do not know what's going to happen as far as these factors go. And it's easier, in my opinion, to decrease down the road versus coming back and saying, oops, we screwed up. Now we got to come back again and increase fees across the board. And in addition to this, I do want to pursue, as the chairman brought up, some of these fees for the smaller producers. And if we're going to look at reducing those, then you've got a $6 million cushion that's going to be further decreased potentially by the action we take on that. And our cushion gets down to a very, very tight amount.
I think that's a good point. can you tell us when we would have that data aggregated to propose any kind of deduction? I think in the prior discussions, you know, this was always a kind of a 2-year cycle that we would need to see, okay, you know, how many people are applying, what kind of, sorry, go ahead.
We think we can come back to you in 6 months with some data. We'll have to work with industry, of course, to get all of that from them. But
On the tiered
we can come back
approach?
to you in about 6 months.
This is on the tiered approach?
Right.
Okay, so within 6 months, we'd have the information be brought back to the commission, and then collectively, we would kind of make a decision on what are the acceptable tiers based on what we're seeing for a possible deduction, but we don't have to put that, we don't have to actually apply that in the midst of the biennium, creating the issues that you guys discussed. This could be something that's forward-looking once we're solid on the data, correct?
Correct.
So in essence, I only say that to kind of address if we, on an ongoing basis, a look forward, we could then readjust any of, with the information, readjust so that we're not doing this weird kind of, you know, tightrope that you guys kind of explained. So I don't particularly see, I don't see any issue with getting the data and then doing it at a point in time where we, you know, don't cause problems to the agency. I think that's the safest way to do it. And more data is always a positive thing because, as you said, all of these variables, no one knows exactly what's going to happen. But one question I want to ask, what happens if we're wrong on the assumptions and we collect more? I mean, is the issue there, we just report to the legislature, we've collected way too much, and they take that GR and allocate that to whatever uses they see fit?
Yes, it goes to general revenue, not to the agency, so we won't know exactly where that extra might end up. But I can tell you, we've also committed to, in the rule that we just adopted, looking at this again at the end of the 2-year cycle, which, you know, 2-year cycle, that's what most of our permits and licenses are on. Having a full set of data for 2 years is really the ideal before we make changes. And so, you know, I think we can come back after 2 years and definitely we'll have the information we need to adjust downward if we need to.
Okay.
But we'll have the data in 6 months to be able to review it, see if we need to make a decision sooner than that or action sooner.
I think we can bring you some options on the tiered approach and how you might implement that within 6 months or a little bit longer. Depends on the participation that we get from industry, but
Just one of the challenges with a tier distribution or staggered, you know, small business, large business is how do you make that determination? The code provides no guidance in terms of what is a small winery, what is a small brewery, I'm sorry, small distillery. So the commission would have to set that threshold of determining small versus large business. So just something else that y'all would have to consider at some point if you did it staggered.
Looking at, go ahead.
No, so what I'm hearing is that it's virtually impossible for us to make any kind of an assumption as to, even if we create a tiered system and implement a tiered revenue collection system, what sort of impact that might have in further reductions. So in other words, obviously the delta between, what's the delta between a 10% reduction and a 12% reduction is what again?
4%, $6 million.
$6 million, right? Okay, so the difference between 10 and 12 is $6 million. If we stay, and if we feel that in a less than perfect world, 15 is right at break even, that is absolutely neutral with no possibility of anything deteriorating further in the economy or in the industry. So 15 we know is not is an option off the table. If we go to 10, assuming that we'd like to, ultimately the 12 seems to be a mid-range, but there's still some variability. Even if we tiered it, I'm not sure that would be a $6 million reduction. I mean, because I mean, we can't necessarily go back to the $840. There has to be some increase, as has been discussed throughout the day, through both industry and through you guys. So my concern about keeping it at 10 and then waiting on the data from a tiering of the wine producers, et cetera, or rather not wine producers, but small businesses, is that it's really not going to be that impactful. I guess, is there any way to opine on that?
So you look at the production here, in-state producers, they're about 1,000. So 1,000, no matter how, unless there's a massive increase or decrease, not a big impact to the bottom line. The three greatest volumes of all the permit types, or a mixed beverage, a wine and beer on premise and a wine and beer off premise. Change anything about those three, it has a massive effect on the bottom line. But affecting three permit types and the production tier won't be dramatic.
Right. So, and I'm not debating Commissioner Atkins, you bring up excellent points, but if, from what I think I'm hearing that if we go to 12% and we do go into a tiered system of small to large, that differential would still not be that impactful. It's not like this would thrust us down another 3%.
Right.
And I might not be being clear. But this is important. I think we need to really kind of talk about this now to make sure we're all on the same page.
So there's tiered system, but then we could also, in 6 months, come to a blanket reduction from 10% to 12% across the board as well. Is that correct?
Holistic data aggregation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the tiered system doesn't work for a number of complicated reasons and trying to define those, but I certainly do not want to collect revenue. We are not an agency that produces revenue. My concern is the uncertainty that is ahead of us. And we've got a little bit of a cushion here, but that cushion is based upon the estimated max amount of revenue. I don't want to come underneath that, and I don't want to be back in a position 6 months or a year where we're going back to the industry and saying we've got to increase fees, when at that point, if we're increasing fees, it's a tough economy. There's already issues that are being faced by these. So I'd rather have a little bit more of a cushion up front and be able to have the option to reduce down the road. And we have the option to reduce down the road, whether it's a tiered or a blanket reduction. So that's my opinion. Relative to the winery permit, what is the proposed fee right now on the winery permit?
$3,400.
$3,400 prior to the 10% or 12% reduction that we're talking about?
As published.
And Mr. Angel thrown out 1,370. What is the combined permit fee now?
I would have to look that up. We currently pay is $851 for a winery permit. There are also subordinate permits that they can give. I think that's probably what he was referring to.
And I don't know if any of the other commissioners want to discuss that or save that for another time. But, if we're looking at a 10% versus 12%, I'd like to discuss the winery permit. And again, that's going to affect this decision-making. I do not think we can move to 12% and then make any other fee reductions across the board. It's going to be far too tight. So if we stay at 10% and the industry feedback was that is acceptable outside of winery, then we address the winery permit, potentially reducing that further. Again, we're getting tighter and tighter on that cushion. So
Commissioner Atkins, I'd like to go back to the percentages before we get too much further down on the tiered approach and the wineries and so forth. I made my comments in previous meetings about administrative costs versus revenue, and anybody who's interested in that can go back and review that. I'm not going to go over that again today. We need to pass something. What's on the table is a revenue neutral target or targets that are not revenue neutral. I have to choose between those, and if forced, which I am today, to choose between and among those, I want to choose something that's truly revenue neutral, not a 7.8% increase in general revenue, which, by the way, isn't revenue to us. It has nothing to do with our operations, except in a roundabout way, a biennium later, it's money to the state. So it doesn't affect our operations at all. It's just a revenue target for the state. At any rate, I think that we should be revenue neutral, and there's no reason to build in a cushion because, again, literally nothing happens if we don't reach our own personally imposed revenue neutral target. No need for a cushion, no need for 10%, no need for 12%. Let's be revenue neutral. It looks like a 16% reduction, which isn't a reduction. That's only a reduction from the amount of revenue that we would have raised from the fees that were proposed back in June. It's not actually a reduction of anything except for the inflated figure that we came out with 6 or 7 weeks ago. So again, I really do think that we need to be revenue neutral here today. That's not 10%, it's not 12%, it's somewhere between 15 and 16. I haven't done the math, but that's what it looks like to me. So anyway, before we get too far down and whether we're going to choose 10 or 12 and what we're going to do with this permit or that permit, I want to bring the discussion back to a larger question, which I think is really important, which is, are we here to increase the amount of revenue that we bring into the state? Again, not for us, but for the state, or are we here to be revenue neutral? I think that today we are here to be revenue neutral, and that's, again, 15 or 16%.
What is 15.5?
Yeah, okay, 15.5. Whatever happens, thanks, Commissioner Mack. Whatever happens to be revenue neutral, that's what I'm
That's a better question
today.
Percentages. Do you guys have what is the number to be right on the dot?
Just vote, please. 15.5. That's what
So explain to me what Commissioner Boatwright was discussing. If we come under the number, what does that really mean?
Absolutely nothing.
If I could make a comment, our GAA does have a rider 7. We are obligated to collect enough general revenue to pay for ourselves and our indirect costs. So we are currently obliged to collect enough revenue so we're revenue neutral to the state overall, to the treasury. Failure to collect enough revenue to pay for our own appropriation means that the LBE may request the comptroller to reduce our subsequent appropriations by that amount. So if we fall short and we only collect $10 million less than we cost, then they can reduce us by $10 million in the subsequent year. And this would be directed by the legislature, the LBE, and the comptroller would make that final adjustment. But that is always a possibility because we are statutorily required to pay for ourselves.
But upon that occurrence, we'd have enough data at that point to make holistic changes to get to that current amount or solve for that deficiency that the comptroller would take, correct? Nothing stops us. Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
Nothing stops us from, as Boatwright is saying, going right in at the number, neutral, whatever, going forward, seeing how things pan out in the economy and seeing if we have expansion in the market. I believe we internally have 9% growth year over year in the industry. So we can see what that expansion looks like. If we're wrong, we come back, holistic increase. The record is very clear that we've tried to stay very revenue neutral. We can't predict the future, right? And so I kind of understand that raising any fee is a fight, but the record would be very clear. We did something with the legislature's intention of being revenue neutral, but we had to come back because we're not generating enough trying to adhere to their requirement. Is there any issue with that?
The possibility is we could adjust fees as needed. That was what Sunset's recommendation was. The would be up to the commission how often they would want to do that and if they want them to go up or down. So do we want to increase fees or do we want to set them at a rate that's conservative? And then perhaps reevaluate the next biennium to reduce the next biennium. Again, I'm a revenue estimator and a financial person, so I'm very conservative. So revenue neutral is, kind of our goal. Again, we're not making money off of this, as Commissioner Atkins pointed out. We're not in the business of making a profit. This is just to keep our status quo and to maintain current operations, but with a new set of fees, with a new set of permit types. So that was the goal.
So I guess, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so these are all extraordinarily valid and important points that, we don't want to make a mistake here, obviously. We want to be cognizant of the needs of our industry and also the legislative, requirement that we be revenue neutral. I appreciate Commissioner Boatwright's perspective on this. And I also appreciate the variability in the economy does happen, but we don't want to go back and start raising fees. Let me just ask a question. I believe that I just want to kind of, if I may, Clark, can I query the commission to see if, I believe we are allowed to, we could reconvene tomorrow under section 551.0411 of the government code, and we do not need to repost a notice. Is that correct, Clark? If we wanted to reconvene tomorrow?
Yeah, you have the ability to do that.
Okay, so I think this, obviously we can't discuss amongst themselves, but we can independently, Clark, I believe, discuss with staff on these issues. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if I may ask my fellow commissioners, if we were to reconvene tomorrow on this item and on this item alone, are you available?
I'm in court all day tomorrow, Chairman.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Y'all can do it without me. But my position's not going to change.
No,
I want to be revenue neutral. So,
yep.
Just y'all can go on, but just I'm revenue neutral.
Yep, you're well said and understood. Anyone else have a problem with tomorrow?
I'll be in the car, actually headed to Austin tomorrow. I've got several meetings, so I could be available, I guess, via phone. I do want to say that where I feel more comfortable in voting is that 12%. Just looking at if we putting on my business hat, doing the 15 right off the bat. And if that doesn't work for a business, we have to come back in 6 months and change it. That is uncertainty in the business market. And I don't think that's a message that we want to send. We need to have certainty in your business plan moving forward for budgeting and all of those reasons. So from an industry standpoint, I think that they're looking for us to set some type of standard. On the 10%, I'm hesitant because I don't think that gives us enough wiggle room. Why I feel the message is extremely clear. We want to be revenue neutral. It's important for many reasons. Every industry within our umbrella has been hit hard. And we don't take raising the fees lightly. Clearly, TABC, Ms. Horton and her team has done an outstanding job reaching out to the industries, having all of them here today, praising the staff on their transparency is something I don't think I've ever seen in a government entity singing praises of being able to answer questions and being responsive. So I feel the 12% is where I'm comfortable at, and I'm happy to kind of talk further through it. One of the things I also think was really important is the percentage of the scale that we're talking about. When you heard the information coming back that it's about 1,000 possibly, which really doesn't move the needle either way for us in a big way. So I like the idea of getting the data back so we can take a look at it, but really our revenue is generated by the larger group and not that small 1,000 or so to move our numbers to make us move either way on a percentage point. But it's still, even though they're 1,000, they're an important 1,000, and we need to figure out what that scalability of the fees are going to be. So I just wanted to mention my thoughts before we decide to maybe reconvene tomorrow.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Yeah, if I'm not going to be around tomorrow, I want to make one point it's related to all this, but it's something that I would have made if we were going to have a longer discussion. I'll just make it now, and I want staff to keep it in mind going forward. First of all, I've talked to Shana a lot, a fair amount over the last few months on this. She's been fantastic. Marianne too. They know what they're doing. They're great. From a technical lawyering aspect, this rulemaking has been great. Grateful for their hard work, and I'm looking forward to working with them in the future, which leads me to the point I want to make. We're talking about coming back in 6 months and looking at our data to see where our revenue is. And so that's good. More data, the better. I want to caution everybody though, and remind them that under section 316.045 of the government code, in the next biennium, we're going to have to set our fees according to administrative costs. We're going to have to lower our fees to match our actual administrative costs. We have to start that review. That's going to be a really, really difficult process. So although this data about revenue is great, I look forward to reviewing it myself when the time comes. We're going to need radically different data in order to comply with our statutes going forward. And I want to offer my assistance to staff. I don't know more about rulemaking than you all do, but I do have that background, and I'd be happy to do some legwork if it would be useful. But that's something that we need to get on now, if we haven't already, and start to try to comply with this administrative cost rather than revenue generation model of setting fees. And again, I look forward to working with Shana and everybody else, and everybody else on that going forward. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. Well, Commissioner Atkins, Commissioner Mack, if we were to meet tomorrow, would you be available?
I can make myself available.
Same here, Chairman.
So if we were to reconvene tomorrow at 10:30 Central Time, Commissioner Marino, where will you be tomorrow at 10:30? Will you be in the car?
I will be in the car, yes.
Okay. Clark, is that acceptable for, as long as she can Zoom from the car, that would work, would it not?
I believe if Commissioner Moreno is able to Zoom in via video conference, then that should certainly work. I will need to check and see if telephonically appearing, so just via your cell phone as opposed to the Zoom app. I'll need to check and confirm whether that's going to be workable under the governor's waivers of certain Open Meeting Act provisions.
How long will it take for you to come up with that answer? Could we take a 10-minute break here?
5-minute break.
5-minute break. All right. I propose that we take a 5-minute break. Do we need to get out of open session to go into a 5-minute break, Clark?
Just reset.
Yes, just recess.
Okay, fine. We are,
I'm gonna have to run to the airport right now, but I'll be joining via Zoom from the car to the airport, so when we reconvene.
okay. All right. So, for procedural issue, we are in recess for approximately 10 minutes. The time is 12:37 p.m. Mr. Smith, if we're able to get Commissioner Atkins on the phone, I want to proceed today.
Chairman, I'm on.
Okay, great. Okay. As soon as we get Commissioner Boatwright, Marino, and Commissioner Mack back, we're going to proceed.
Okay, we got Mac. Marino's here. Boatwright is on. Okay, we are able to break out a recess.
Okay.
Let's wait for General Nettles and Chaplain. Let me go.
Okay.
That's what to get them.
Marion,
Clark, just give me a green light when we're ready.
what was a negative amount? At 15.
Chairman, I believe we're ready.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to call the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission back into session. The time is 12:46 p.m. We have a quorum. In light of the importance of this decision, I have decided that we will not reconvene tomorrow because I don't want Commissioner Boatwright to be absent. I think he needs to be here. I think we all need to be here. This is arguably one of the most important decisions that this agency has made in a very long time. And I think it's important that industry knows that we are all here and that the discussions were open and productive. I think that in sort of in reflection, you know, look, I'm sort of in the projection business, and I know that government and private sector are not the same. However, there are variabilities in anything that we call a pro forma, and projections can go one way or another. In our case, if the number of permits that we anticipate do not come to fruition, then the situation could be less favorable for the industry in general. Also, at the same time, if there's a relapse of COVID or there's an economic pullback, things that we cannot predict, nor I really think are in the business of prediction and predicting to perfect science, we can't control. And therefore, I think to the best of our ability to proceed with what I call in my business, a base case, best case, and worst case scenario. And I believe that far too often, at least in the last year, just in general at the federal government level, we have operated too often on worst case scenarios. And I believe that in our case, we have a worst case scenario, a best case scenario, but I do believe that the base case scenario is 12%, because I think it does provide, it telegraphs to industry, and I think it telegraphs to the legislature that we are seeking to reach revenue neutrality, but we also are being accommodated to the industry, but understanding that what we don't want is to place ourselves in a position where we are so wrong that the end results are not favorable. So with that, I am going to call a motion today And that I move that all fees represented in figure 33.23, except for the consumer delivery permit fee and the mixed beverage renewal permit fee, be decreased by 12% and then rounded to the nearest $100 increment. And that the mixed beverage permit renewal fee be set at half of the fee for the original mixed beverage permit. Further, I move to direct staff to create a task force to evaluate at a minimum the following questions. 1, can the agency establish a separate license or permit fee based upon the size of the applicant's business? 2, if so, what would be the appropriate definition of small producer? The task force should answer the question for each type of producer, and how would TABC determine or measure the size of the business? Number 3, what should the fees be for small producers? Number 4, how will the agency determine if the small permit holders meet the definition? For example, will additional auditing be required? Number 5, how would this type of fee structure impact our new AIM system? Would programming the system in this way result in a cost to the state? And finally, staff is directed to report to us with recommendations that address all these questions by March 31st, 2022. That is the motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Marino, we have a second. We will now vote.
Commissioner Atkins, can I have a verbal vote? All have voted.
All right. Can you please tell me the vote count?
We have 3 ayes and 1 nay and 1 abstain.
All right. Our votes have been recorded and the motion is approved. All right. Thank you very much. And I do look forward to the aggregation of data and for us to revisit, hopefully by March 31st of 2022. The next item is executive session. Mr. Smith, do we have a need or anything that we need to go into executive session on at this time?
Not in my estimation, Chair.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we have not had executive session. There was no action taken. Next is announcement of the next meeting date. Next scheduled commission meeting date is planned for Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. Commissioners, do you have a problem with that date?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, the September what?
September 28th?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. The commission is scheduled to meet on Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. In closing, I wanted to thank everyone. I want to thank the staff for the amount of work that they've put into this. I want to thank industry, so involved in the process. I'd like to thank all the individuals who came today. And I also want to thank those who expressed dissent. You know, I sort of informally, in my own opinion, sometimes felt that The unanimous votes smack of not collusion, but it just of groupthink. And I think that debate is such an extraordinary thing in our country. And I think that the ability to disagree politely and constructively is essential to this republic. And I think, unfortunately, reasonable debate has been lost upon so many of us. So I am very much grateful for all of the input. I'm grateful for Commissioner Atkins, Commissioner Mack, Commissioner Marino, for Commissioner Boatwright, for the hearty discussion. And I will say, in the 4 years that I have been in this position, I think this was the most intense and spirited debate that we have had. And I'm personally proud to be a part of it. And so I just want to thank everyone and General Nettles and staff for all your hard work. This has been an incredibly intense time, and for all of us, for the industry, for the government, and for us as members of this body. So I thank you all very much. And the next item is adjournment. The time is now 12:55 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you all.